Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to another deep dive.
Today, we're journeying into a really ancient and profound text. It's a collection of verses from the Therigatha, specifically a section called the Mahānipāto. And this isn't just some dusty old manuscript, you know. It's more like a vivid picture, really, of the personal journeys, the insights, the experiences of early Buddhist monks. It gives us this fascinating window into their path to liberation. And it's filled with, well, raw human experience, practical advice, and these moments of really deep wisdom.
Absolutely. And our goal, our mission in this deep dive is to sort of dig out those timeless nuggets of wisdom from these verses. We want to explore how these ancient teachings, they really speak directly to our modern lives, helping you understand not just what they said, but crucially why it still matters today. Think of it as a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about a really rich spiritual tradition. So let's start with something very personal, something surprisingly relatable, I think, even for people on a dedicated spiritual path. Imagine someone who's deliberately chosen renunciation. They've gone forth from home to homelessness, as the text puts it. But even for them, these thoughts from kasha, which can mean Mara, the evil one, or maybe more broadly, just inner defilements, temptations, they still assail them. The text uses this incredible image. It says these thoughts are like 1,000 skilled archers surrounding you, never retreating.
Wow, yeah, that's powerful.
It really is. It suggests this isn't some, one-time battle you win. It's a continuous effort. So how does the monk's response, this really resolute, I am firm in the Dhamma, how does that offer a kind of practical model for us today when we feel, attacked by our own inner critics or distractions?
That's a great point because the profound insight here, it isn't really about making the thoughts vanish entirely. It's not magic. It's about fundamentally shifting your relationship to them. When the monk declares, I am firm in the Dhamma, what they're doing is asserting control over their own path, their inner state. And Dhamma here, it's not just the Buddha's teachings in a narrow sense. It's like universal truth, the path to liberation itself. So it's this unwavering commitment to that truth. It almost turns the difficulty itself into proof of their resolve. It's like saying, okay, archers, you're there, but I'm not moving.
Right. Refusing to be pushed off course. So we've seen how the monk confronts these initial inner attacks. But the text, it doesn't just stop there, identifying the challenges. It dives into these broader defilements, talks about abandoning aversion and attachment, arati-ratia, and also these thoughts dwelling on the home, gahasitanya kavitaka, basically longing for the old life. And then it uses this really striking phrase, one who has no craving is without craving. Now that sounds almost circular, doesn't it, like a riddle? But it feels like it gets to the heart of something deep. I mean, I'm thinking about how much of our modern life, our striving, is just driven by endless craving, wanting more, wanting different. How does the text suggest we actually, undo that ingrained pattern? What's it mean to be truly without craving?
Yeah, it does sound like a riddle, but it points directly to a fundamental insight. Everything is impermanent. The text argues that deeply realizing the transient nature of everything, forms, sounds, smells, feelings, thoughts, even the earth itself, that's the key to liberation. The radical insight of impermanence isn't just, casually acknowledging things change. It's truly understanding that our suffering comes from clinging to the illusion that things are permanent or should be. So when we recognize that the grounds for existence, the basis of our being and experience are always shifting, and that our perceptions are fleeting, then we can begin to dispel desire right there at the root. The true sage, the text says, is unattached precisely because they've seen through this illusion of permanence. And another big obstacle mentioned is conceit, manai. That's basically an inflated sense of self, the ego running wild. If that conceit isn't abandoned, the text warns, it leads inevitably to regret and suffering, just reinforcing that whole cycle of dissatisfaction.
Okay, so it sounds like the text is really methodically breaking down the specific mechanisms of suffering, how it all works. And then the verses offer some very specific advice. For overcoming a particularly intense kind of internal suffering, I am burnt by passion. Heck, what's the prescribed antidote for that kind of internal fire, and how does it actually work?
The response is, well, incredibly insightful and practical too. It says this burning is due to cognitional perversion, which is basically a distorted way of seeing reality, like perceiving something impermanent as if it were permanent or something inherently unsatisfactory as truly satisfying. That's what fuels passion. So the path to cooling this fire involves first avoiding beautiful signs accompanied by passion. Essentially, don't dwell on the things that ignite your desire. Turn away from the triggers and instead cultivate the mind on unpleasantness. Now, that doesn't mean being morbid or miserable. It means reflecting on the transient, impermanent, maybe even the decaying nature of things. That helps to kind of de-glamorize the objects of attachment, reduce their seductive power. It's also crucial, the text says, to foster mindfulness of the body. Really pay attention to the body's sensations, its processes, seeing them clearly without clinging, and to be filled with disillusionment, which isn't despair, it's more like a clear-eyed seeing through of illusions, waking up from the dream. And finally, by cultivating the signless, that's a state of mind free from mental pictures or concepts, and abandoning the inclination to conceit, that ego clinging, then one can truly attain peace. It's like a whole spiritual toolkit for handling difficult emotions.
Wow, yeah, a complete toolkit. And beyond these internal thoughts and passions, the text also gives some pretty profound guidance on how we actually speak. What defines well-spoken words? Vaka supasita.
The advice is remarkably clear and really universal, I think. Speak words that don't harm yourself or others. Simple, but profound. Speak words that are pleasant, not necessarily flattering, but, constructive, kind. And the text asserts, truth is immortal speech. This is the eternal Dhamma, highlighting the absolute importance of truthfulness. Ultimately, it considers the Buddha's speech, the kind that leads to peace, Nibbāna, in the end of suffering, is the supreme word. And Nibbāna, just for context for you listening, that's the ultimate goal in Buddhism. It's a state of profound peace, total freedom from suffering, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. So the highest form of speech, according to this, is the speech that actually guides others towards that ultimate freedom.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit now. We've talked about individual practice, mindful speech. Let's look at the powerful role of community. The Mahānipāta paints this really vibrant picture of the assembly around the Buddha, and it introduces figures like Sāriputta, who's presented as a prime example of profound wisdom within that community.
Yes, Sāriputta. He's described as deeply wise, an expert in the path and the non-path, which means he understood not only the way to liberation, but also what leads away from it, what the pitfalls are. And his teaching style is highlighted too. He teaches concisely and also speaks extensively. He could adapting his instruction, to whoever he was talking to, their needs. The verses even compare his voice to the sound of a myna bird, saying monks listen to his sweet voice with glad hearts. Now, that's not just poetry, is it? It illustrates how wisdom was skillfully transmitted and how it was received within the community. It emphasizes that vital connection between a wise teacher and, receptive students.
And what about the larger gatherings? The text mentions 500 monks together for purification and over 1,000 monks attending the Buddha. It really paints this picture of a magnificent leader and his very devoted followers. The Buddha himself is depicted with these grand analogies like a wheel-turning monarch, surrounded by his ministers, or in his case, his disciples. How do these grand images help us understand his role and his influence?
Well, they really underscore his profound influence and also his compassionate teachings. A wheel-turning monarch, that signifies a universal ruler, someone whose reign is just benevolent. Here, it's applied to the Buddha's spiritual authority. And his disciples, they're described as possessing threefold knowledge, which means they've attained three key insights: knowing past lives, knowing how beings pass away and are reborn according to their karma, and crucially, knowing how to destroy the mental defilements. This shows they've escaped death, meaning they've broken free from that cycle of rebirth. He's praised as the destroyer of the arrow of craving, a very direct image, and like a great cloud showering his disciples, symbolizing how his teachings nourish everyone. The text says the Buddha, surrounded by the Sangha, that's the community of monks and nuns, shines. He offers a pure Dhamma Nibbāna, which is fear-free. It paints a picture of this powerful, unified spiritual movement, all dedicated to achieving the highest liberation.
And within that movement, the text gives us specific examples of individuals who really embody the path. They show the profound liberation that was actually achievable through this practice. We see figures like Koṇḍañña, described as enlightened by the Buddha, very keen in his effort, enjoying solitude, and also having that threefold knowledge. And then there's Moggallāna, described as greatly powerful, someone who could apparently survey the minds of others, seeing them as released and unattached. These are, powerful testaments to the real-world outcome of these teachings, aren't they?
Absolutely. And all these individuals, from the really prominent disciples like Sāriputta down to others like Koṇḍañña and Moggallāna, They're all united by the core teachings. That's what underpins their collective wisdom and practice. The bedrock of their understanding, and really of the entire tradition, is the Buddhist teaching of the Four Noble Truths, taught, the text says, out of compassion for living beings. Suffering, its origin, which is craving, its cessation, Nibbāna, and the Noble Eightfold Path that lends to that cessation. That fundamental framework, it provides a clear map for anyone seeking this kind of liberation, whether they're practicing alone or within a community.
Okay, shifting gears again slightly, the text gives us this really fascinating account of like a real-time dilemma the community faced. It's one of the most compelling narratives here, I think. A direct inquiry about a monk named Nibbāna who had recently died. And the community is clearly curious, maybe even a bit anxious. They're eager to understand the ultimate fate of this monk, who was apparently well-known, famous even. They really want to know, did he make it? Did his spiritual journey reach the final goal?
Exactly. They go straight to the Buddha and ask these very pointed questions. Was his holy life fruitful? Did he attain Nibbāna with or without remainder? Which refers to Nibbāna during life versus after death. And, maybe most importantly, how was he liberated? What was the nature of his release? It shows this deep, very human need to understand the culmination of a spiritual life. A desire for clear validation, you could say, of the path's outcome.
And their appeal to the Buddha, it's just full of reverence, full of trust. They call him the Eye of All. They liken him to Saka, who's the king of the gods in their cosmology. And they plead with him, dispel their doubt. This level of absolute reliance on the Buddha as the ultimate source of knowledge, it's so clear here. What does that profound trust in one figure tell you about the early Sangha?
Well, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about how they perceived the Buddha's unique enlightenment and authority. He wasn't just a teacher. He was seen as the one who had fully realized the ultimate truth, and therefore he was the only one who could definitively confirm the liberation of others. And the community, they didn't just want an answer. They wanted a beautiful, clear explanation. They asked the Buddha to speak sweetly, like a swan. The Buddha's reply is, characteristically perhaps, concise but incredibly profound. He says, Nibbāna cut craving here in name and form and crossed birth and death completely. It's just this statement of absolute release delivered with undeniable authority.
Okay, so let's unpack those powerful phrases then. What does it really mean to cut craving in name and form and to cross birth and death completely? This feels like the absolute core of liberation in this tradition. And the text notes the community's profound relief when they hear this. They get it. They understand that Nibbāna cut Mara's strong net, escaped the grip of temptation and death, and overcame the difficult-to-cross realm of death.
Right. So to cut craving in name and form, that refers to utterly eradicating attachment to what makes up our individual existence. In Buddhist thought, name and form basically refers to the mind name, covering consciousness, feeling, perception, mental formations, and the body form, our physical being. So cutting craving there means recognizing that all these components are impermanent. They're not a fixed, permanent self, and completely releasing all clinging to them, letting go of me and mine. And to cross birth and death completely, well, that signifies achieving liberation from the whole cycle of rebirth and suffering, samsara. It's the ultimate freedom. And it's also really interesting to note that many of these verses, the ones about Nibbāna, were actually spoken by the venerable elder Vaṅgīsa. And Vaṅgīsa recounts his own transformative journey earlier in the text. He says he used to wander around as a poet, quite skilled apparently, but then he heard the Dhamma from the Buddha. He gained faith, ordained, and really understood the teachings, specifically the aggregates, the sense bases, and the elements. These are the fundamental categories Buddhism uses to analyze experience, the 5 components making up personality, the 6 senses and their objects, the basic elements of reality. His personal story just underscores that this profound, transformative power of the teachings, it's open to anyone who really commits. And then he, as a poet, articulated this liberation so beautifully for others.
So bringing this all together, what does this all mean for you listening? This deep dive into the Mahānipāto, it's offered us, I think, a really powerful glimpse. A glimpse into both the individual journey of liberation, the inner struggles, and also the profound support found within a wise community. It distills some of the clearest teachings we have on overcoming those inner obstacles and attaining a lasting freedom.
Yeah, exactly. And the insights from these ancient verses, they remain strikingly relevant today, don't they? The importance of understanding and overcoming your own internal Mara, your own defilements, whatever form they take. The profound impact of mindful, truthful speech, how much harm or good our words can do. The strength and support you can find in a community that's dedicated to wisdom and growth. And ultimately, that radical freedom that comes from truly cutting craving right at its roots.
So let's end with a final thought, something for you to maybe ponder. If these ancient texts speak so powerfully about cutting craving and crossing the realm of death, what are the cravings and perhaps the realms of suffering in your own life that this deep dive invites you to examine, to understand, and maybe, just maybe, begin to transcend?